Friends, good morning. Today we are going to learn a concept called capital structure. Before we will go on proceeding for capital structure, we should know what is capital. So in simple terms, capital is the fund required to initiate any business activity. For example, if a person wanted to start a grocery shop, then what are the things that are required? Number one is land, then he will require furniture, then he then he will require machinery. So the amount which will get invested is nothing but a capital. So in other words, capital is the amount required to purchase long-term assets or fixed asset of an organization. Am I right? Then friends, when we are talking about capital structure according to Gunstenberg is nothing but a study of makeup of firm's capital. In this picture you can see there are different colored circle is there. So this is nothing but a capital structure of a particular company, whereby you can see the contribution of the total capital has came up from sources like equity shares, preference shares, reserves, debentures, bonds and long-term loans. So a capital structure is nothing but a study of how a company has raised its capital. Am I right? So now here it becomes inevitable for us to understand, if this is the capital structure, then what are the sources of capital? Am I right? So moving to the same, the sources of capital. Friends, as you can see, capital sources are mainly been categorized into two types. Type 1 is equity sources, which are also known as owned sources, and point 2 is debt sources, or we can also call it as a borrowed sources. Okay, in equity sources there are three types of examples like equity shares, preference shares and reserves and surplus. Whereas in debt sources there are sources like debentures, bonds or long-term loans. You can also call it as long-term liability, or you can also have a name called long-term borrowings. So these are the sources of capital. Friends, so equity kind of sources are the sources which gives ownership. That's why they are called as owned sources. And debt sources are the kind of sources which do not give ownership, but which gives you a right to withdraw interest out of the money that has been provided, and that is why they are called as borrowed sources. Is it clear? So now let us move on to a concept called capitalization. Okay, so capitalization is nothing but a study of how a company has raised its total capital requirement. Okay, so what are the considerations during capitalization? Number one is, as you are knowing, capital is always in scarcity. Okay, number two is, when you are doing a capitalization, you have to balance between risk and return. Number three, when you are moving towards capitalization, you have to give a considerations for liabilities, because when you are raising sources through equity kind of sources, you are supposed to make the payments of dividend, and when you are making the receiving the payments from debt sources, then you are supposed to make the interest as a payment. Okay, number three, one more consideration is exercising of control. When you are raising a capital through particular source, then it might happen that that particular source might also take ownership. So to exercise a better control onto a company, you have to balance between the owned kind of sources and a borrowed kind of sources. And one more factor that is important to be considered is a cost of capital. So cost of capital is nothing but a minimum rate of return which one is expecting from the investment. Okay, now moving further, let us see what are the various theories of capitalization. Friends, there are two major theories of capitalization. One is cost theory and another one is a earnings theory. Okay, so cost theory depicts that a total firm's capital structure would be dependent onto the cost that is required for the machinery or the fixed assets required to be acquired. Okay, so let us say, for example, if there is a company for whom there is a requirement of a building, plant and land, so the total cost of building, plant and land togetherly would form the total amount of capital which a business is requiring. Okay, so this is a cost theory, and there is another theory, that is earnings theory. So earning theory says that the total capital of the company should not be on the basis of the total fund requirement, but it should be parallel to the total earnings of the business. For example, if you are going to start a business for which 10 lakh rupees are the fund requirement, and if the rate of return that you will be getting out of that is, let us say, 10%, so the total fund required, the total revenue that would get generated out of it would be 10,000, 1 lakh a month. So if the 10,000 per percent return gives you 1 lakh rupee, and if you have taken 10 lakh rupees as a different capital sources, then you better knows the sources of capital are also having the liabilities attached to it. So either dividend needs to be paid or either interest needs to be paid. So if the total of the dividend and the interest is more than 1 lakh rupees, then you cannot go on raising the 10 lakh rupees funds as a capital. Here earning theory says that if your money is 1 lakh rupee as a revenue, then you are supposed to develop the sources of capital which will not have a more liabilities than rupee 1 lakh. So earning theory says like that you should raise a capital only up to the level at which you can cater the liability payments. So this is a earnings theory. Friends, moving further, let us move towards the types of capitalization. Okay, so there are basically three types of capitalizations: over capitalization, under capitalization and fair capitalization. Number one, over capitalization. Over capitalization happens when there is a presence of excess capital as compared to level and requirement of the company. Number two, under capitalization. Under capitalization is a situation of presence of lower capital as compared to level and requirement of the company. And number three is an ideal situation called fair capitalization. Fair capitalization is a presence of excess amount of exact amount of capital as compared to the level and requirement of the company. Okay, so these are the three capitalization methods. Moving further, let us study all of them one by one. Overcapitalization. What are the causes of overcapitalization to happen? Sometimes it happens that the company might have purchased the assets at a inflated rates. Number two, company might have paid huge money for acquiring intangible assets like goodwill, patents, copyrights, etc. Okay, or company might have raised excess fund just to take the advantage of the favorable market conditions without having any concrete plan of the investment of the capital that they have raised. And number four is wrong estimation of earnings or amount of earning by the business organization. So these are the causes of a company of meeting to over capitalization. Then what are the remedies to that? There are four ways by which you can minimize this over capitalization. Number one is either you can go on making the repayments of debts. Number two, you can go on making the repayment of preference shares. Number three, you can also go on reducing the face value of shares. And number four, you can go on for buyback of shares. Now friends, let us see under capitalization. Friend, the reasons of undercapitalization are wrong estimation of earnings, unexpected or windfall profits, monopolistic business situations, conservative dividend policy by the management, or constant modernization and upgradation of fixed assets. What are the remedies for the same? Either you can go on issuing the bonus shares, or you can go on the splitting of shares. Okay. Now let us see a concept called cost of capital. Friends, cost of capital can be defined in two different ways. Definition number one, it is a minimum rate of return which one expects from the investment. And number two, cost of capital is the cost of raising funds. Okay, this is more important for each one of us to remember the concept called cost of capital. Now moving further, let us see the various types of cost of capital. Friends, basically there are four types of cost of capital. Number one is a specific cost of capital. Number two is WACC, that is weighted average cost of capital. Number three is historical cost of capital, and number four is future cost of capital. Okay. Now moving further, we will see the specific cost of capitals, in which number one is cost of debt. Technically you can show it by a term called KD. So cost of debt is the minimum rate of return which one expects from the debt sources, or cost of debt is cost of raising debt sources. Okay. So if I is interest, F is a face value, P is a net amount realized, and T to be a tax rate, then cost of debt could be calculated with the formula called KD is equals to I in bracket 1 minus T plus in bracket F minus P divided by N divided by P plus F divided by 2. So this is the formula by which you can calculate cost of debt. Now let us see the second specific cost of capital, that is cost of term loan. It is also said to be KD. So cost of term loan is the minimum rate of return which one expects from its loan, or cost of term loan is cost of raising the term loan. The formula to calculate the same is KD is equals to I in bracket 1 minus T, where I is a interest and T is the rate of taxation. Moving further, let us see the cost of preference capital, that is KP. A cost of preference capital is the minimum rate of return which one expects from the preference shares, or it is the cost of raising preference capital. For example, if PD is considered out to be preference dividend, F to be face value, P to be net amount realized, and N to be number of years, then the formula for calculation of cost of preference capital is KP is equal to PD plus F minus P divided by N divided by P plus F divided by 2. Okay. Now let us move further for another specific cost of capital, that is cost of equity. We call it as a KE. Cost of equity is the minimum rate of return which one expects from its equity shares, or cost of equity capital is cost of raising equity capital. For calculating cost of equity, there are three different theories, three approaches. Number one, dividend price approach. So according to dividend price approach, cost of equity KE is equal to D divided by P. Number two is a dividend price plus growth approach. According to this approach, cost of equity is KE equal to D divided by P plus G, where G is a growth rate. And there is another methodology by which you can calculate the same, that is earning price approach. According to earning price approach, cost of equity is equal to EPS divided by P. Okay. Now let us move further for the various factors that affect onto capital structure. The various factors are EBIT EPS analysis. Number two is cost of capital. Number three is leverage. Number four is analysis of debt capacity. Number five is cash flow analysis. Number six is control. Number seven is flexibility. Number eight is timings of the issue. Number eight is growth rate. Number nine is stability of earnings. Next is attitude of the learners, and the last one is a taxation structure in the country. So these are the factors that do affect onto capital structure. So let us see them one by one. According to EBIT EPS analysis, a company's capital structure should be formed by looking after the EPS of the various alternatives, and the alternative whereby the EPS is more, that option of capital raising should be opted. Number 2 is cost of capital. As you know friends, cost of capital is the minimum rate of return which company is expecting. So the cost of capital of the company should be as low as possible. Okay. Number 3 is a leverage. Leverage is a measure of risk. There are basically 3 types of leverages: operating leverage, financial leverage, and combined leverage. So a company should go on making a capital structure whereby the leverages would be minimum. Number 4 is analysis of debt capacity. While framing a capital structure of the company, it should also be studied as to what is the debt paying capacity of the company, and looking after that only the capital structure should be formed. You should not go on raising the debt sources as a capital source unless and until you have a capacity to go on making the payments of the same. Number 4 is the cash flow analysis. While framing a capital structure, you should also see what is the cash flow structure of the company. If the cash flow is regular, then you should go on making a debt sources as your source of capital. And if the cash flows are interrupted and if they get fluctuating, then you should rely on to equity kind of sources. Next is a control. Friends, as you know, if you are going to raise capital through equity sources, you are supposed to give ownership to other people. And when you are raising the capital from debt sources, you do not give ownership. So to make sure that you have a better control onto company's operations, you should hold majority of the stakes or shares of the company. So capital structure framing should also be considered out. What is the impact of control onto that? So you should consider while raising the capital out of it. Next is a flexibility. Friends, when you are raising a capital, it is not like that that is the only situation when you requires a capital. It might happen that in coming future you might arrive with some opportunities for which you will be needing additional capital. So to have a provision for the same, a company should not raise the total capital to which they are capable of repaying. So they should go on keeping some sort of flexibility so that in the future if any opportunity arises, they can also have a possibility of raising the additional capital. Next is the timing of the issue. Friends, when you are raising a capital, there might happen that the market situations are good for the funds to get raised, or there could be a situation that market situation is not good for raising the funds. So when the market situation is good for raising the funds, you will easily get acquired with the capital. So a timing of issue is an important aspect to be considered while raising a capital. Next is a growth rate. Friends, if you are going to work in an economy where growth rate is high, or if you want a capital for the company whose industrial growth rate is high, then it would be very easy for you to raise the capital. So you should also consider the growth rate of the economy or growth rate of the industry to which you are while making the decision of your capital structure. Okay. Next is the stability of the earnings. As I said, if a company is having a stable earnings, it is good for going for the debt sources, and if the company has a fluctuating earnings, then it is better to go for the equity sources. Next is the attitude of the lenders. Friends, it might happen that the lenders are conservative in making the payments. In such kind of situations, you should rely on equity kind of sources, and when the debt providers or lenders are liberal for making the payments, then it is better to switch on for the debt sources. This happens because of the economic conditions of a particular country, which poses the central bank to have a different exercising for the lenders, that is banks and financial institutions. And then last is taxation structure in the country. Friends, when you are raising a capital through debt sources, the debt sources are subject to tax deductions. So if the taxation is very high onto a capital sources by a company, then it is better to rely on to debt sources, because debts are a tax deductible items, and if a company or a country do not provide a lot of deductions onto the debt sources, then it is better to rely on to equity sources. Friends, so this is how you have to arrive at a decision of framing the capital structure. I hope you have understood the video, and if anything happens or if any doubts you do have, you can go on asking for the same. Thank you.